Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company of the 440 Sports Network, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Again, we are on YouTube at Stillman & Co. Like and subscribe. And the thing I love about this new job compared to last year is that when news happens, we can go live. That's right. And yesterday, I thought about it. So again, like and subscribe because we got a wild and crazy coaching search going on. And yes, I will be on the beach starting tomorrow, but I will still be doing the show. And so, again, tell your friends, like and subscribe. Come to the Stillman and Company program where, again, we kind of keep it real. And today, the big news is John Harbaugh. I guess technically that was yesterday. That was the big news. But the big news that we're talking about today, John Harbaugh. And we'll dive into that in a second. First of all, I want to tell you about our presenting sponsor. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. As you know, I've used Hiller at my home for years. That's right. I bought my first home in 2018. And when I did, I immediately joined the Happy Hiller Club. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. They have 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be or the service is free. And I know this because, again, I use Hiller at my home. Learn more at happyhiller.com. Care is their core value. They believe that when they care about others, everybody wins, and they'll take care of the customer on every job, every time. I've got Hiller coming to the home next week when I get back from the beach because it's a little too dry in our home, and I am installing a humidifier into the air conditioning unit, and you know I can't do that, so Hiller's coming out, and they'll do a fantastic job. Proud supporters, the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. Big game, by the way, tonight for Vandy. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Okay. Let's get to John Harbaugh. So yesterday afternoon, I was driving to pick my son up from school, and I saw the news. Adam Schefter was the first one I saw report it. I'm sure they all reported it at the same time, but I saw the news. John Harbaugh is out in Baltimore, and I sat there in the front seat of the car, and this shows you the new way that I think, and I said, do I need to go live and react to this? Do I need to call Lindsay and say, hey, Linz, I need you to come home because I'm going to go jump on right now, talk about John Harbaugh to the Titans? And I decided no. I decided we'll save it for tomorrow. But immediately, as soon as the news came down, which was not to be unexpected, which was, this was not a surprise. As soon as the news came down, and Harbaugh out in Baltimore was a surprise. What was not a surprise was the reaction from the Titan fans, because as soon as John Harbaugh and the Ravens broke up, Titans Twitter decided we need to go get John Harbaugh on social media. I had friends texting me, should we hire Harbaugh, Jared? Everybody, Taylor Lewan, Dear Titans, John Harbaugh is the answer. I had friends on Instagram messaging me saying, Jared, do we need to go get John Harbaugh? And I was like, slow your roll. Take a deep breath. So let's talk about Harbaugh. Now, Adam Schefter reported that John Harbaugh's agent had been called by 7 teams. And there are only 6 jobs open outside of the Ravens job, which obviously they're not going to hire Harbaugh. And I think somebody else, I think it was Diana, maybe reported yesterday that there were 9 teams, 9 that had reached out to Harbaugh, which means teams with coaches are taking a look at John Harbaugh, which makes sense. John Harbaugh has a sterling reputation and has an impeccable resume. And then Adam Schefter said yesterday that the Giants were considered the favorites for Harbaugh. That, however, did not stop Titans fans and Titans social media and my friends from all saying, we need John Harbaugh, Jared. Okay. Well, now let's discuss. Number one, should the Titans hire John Harbaugh? Number 2, what would the Titans have to do to get John Harbaugh? Because the truth is, if the Titans decide they want John Harbaugh, they are recruiting Harbaugh, not he's at their mercy for a job. This ain't Matt Nagy or Mike McCarthy or some unknown coordinator, Davis Webb. He's got options. And then I think we have to say, okay, where do the Titans rank against the other teams that they would be competing for with Harbaugh, or for Harbaugh, they would be competing with for Harbaugh in order to land as their coach. So let's start with the facts before we just start going through all of this. John Harbaugh's career record as an NFL head coach is 180-13, which means he wins 61% of his games. Harbaugh has been to the playoffs as a head coach in the NFL 12 out of 18 years, which means that 66% of the time, John Harbaugh makes it to the playoffs in Baltimore. Now, I don't want to be the one to mention this, and I know the YouTube chat's going to get all pissed off when I say this, but you do know, as Titans general manager, John Robinson won 61% of his games and made the playoffs 66% of the time. No, kind of like John Harbaugh. You people just foaming at the mouth for Harbaugh. You guys hated J-Rob. I'm not saying like they should hire J-Rob. I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing out the irony, if I may. Harbaugh has been to 4 AFC championship games. He has a Super Bowl, and he is a borderline Hall of Famer. And if he wins in spot number 2, he becomes Andy Reid. He absolutely is a Hall of Famer. So I did a search yesterday because I think this is kind of important to at least know. And this is a Google search, so this isn't like player contracts when it comes to coaching contracts. But apparently John Harbaugh signed a new contract last March for $16 to $17 million a season. And Harbaugh will be paid through 2028 if he doesn't get another job. He will. But it does give Harbaugh leverage. If you've got a bad job and you're not offering John Harbaugh serious stability, then John Harbaugh probably says, well, I'll just sit out and wait till next year. So keep that in mind. Again, $16 to $17 million a season. Brian Callahan was reportedly making $3 million a year. Let's keep that in mind. And not only that, Harbaugh will still make that money for the next 3 years if he doesn't ever work a day in his life. So now, let's get to those questions. Number 1, should the Titans hire John Harbaugh? Just short answer, yes. That's the easiest question to answer. Right now, the Titans have very little experience in their building. Mike Borgonzi has 1 season under his belt as general manager. Berg Nihil's tenure as team CEO has been a total disaster. Some people think Chad Brinker's still a big part of the organization. Some don't. But I don't even know what Brinker does anymore, but he doesn't have a lot of experience. And they are going to have a second-year quarterback who did not have a great rookie season. The Titans need a grown-up captain in charge of the ship. And Harbaugh would absolutely be that guy. Just like his brother Jim going to the Chargers, just like Andy Reid going to the Chiefs, just like Vrabel going to the Patriots. The second that John Harbaugh walks into the building, stability and credibility walk in the building. Think about how unstable all the talk is with all the hirings and the firings and the unknown. And again, Harbaugh walks in and it is like, hey, this guy has got the skins on the wall. This guy is a good coach. This guy immediately demands respect. I think you could argue bringing John Harbaugh to the Titans would be similar to bringing Sean Payton into Denver. If you remember, Denver was a total mess. Russell Wilson was there, and they had given him that huge contract, and he had been such a disappointment. They had Nathaniel Hackett the year before. They played a Christmas Day game where they got housed by the Rams with Baker Mayfield, and Russell Wilson is getting sacked, and the offensive linemen aren't even coming to pick Russell up. It was a train wreck in Denver. Sean Payton shows up, rolls up his sleeves, brings in that instant credibility, and all of a sudden, Denver, now the number 1 seed. I have a really hard time turning down John Harbaugh's experience, John Harbaugh's success, and John Harbaugh's credibility, on top of the fact that in his tenure in Baltimore, he drafted 2 quarterbacks. One of them won a Super Bowl, and the other is a 2-time league MVP. And they're very different players, and they had very different offensive coaches, which tells me that John Harbaugh, as a head coach, can manage different styles, different offenses, different types of quarterbacks, etc. So you wouldn't have to say, well, does Cam fit his mold? If he was an offensive coach, you'd have to say, does Cam really fit the Kyle Shanahan offensive mold? Like, does he really remind you of Brock Purdy? Or does he really remind you of Jimmy G? Or does he really remind you of John Elway? Or does he really remind you of Mac Jones? Or does he really remind you of Sam Darnold, who Clint Kubiak has? That's the question. Whoops, turn that down for a second. And you would not have to worry about that at all with John Harbaugh, because he's told you he can do it. His history shows that. Excuse me one second. Got to stay hydrated over here. Okay, so that's easy. That is the easiest one to answer. Yes, they should hire Harbaugh if they can. Now here's where it gets tricky. Number 2, what do the Titans have to do to get John Harbaugh? This one's tough. Because for starters, I just want you to know, I'm going to lay out what I think it would take to get John Harbaugh. And if you, or if they, sit there and say, well, we're not going to do that, well, then you're not getting John Harbaugh. So just be ready to look at it from that lens. If they're not willing to do what it takes to get him, they're not going to get him. It's like going into a car dealership. Let's say a nice car dealership. It's $50,000 for a Lexus. And they tell you it's $50,000. And you say, well, I really only want to pay $25,000. Well, that's great, but you're not driving a Lexus. That's just how it's going to be. So, for starters, I do not know if John Harbaugh would have any interest in the Titans. It's a totally dysfunctional organization that has screamed unstable for the last 4 years. Not that the teams you'd be competing with, the Giants, Atlanta, Cleveland, the Raiders, not that they're just the bastion of success. But with the Titans, everyone that gets hired gets fired right away. And that's probably a big turnoff for a coach who just left the Baltimore Ravens, a well-run organization. Secondly, if you're going to get John Harbaugh, if John Harbaugh has any interest in the Titans, you're going to have to do 2 things that I don't think the Titans want to do. Number 1, you're going to have to give him control of the organization. This is going to be John Harbaugh's team. If you want John Harbaugh, you have to give him control. And secondly, you're going to have to pay him. And if he's making $16 to $17 million a year, and he's going to make that for the next 3 years, you're probably going to have to pay him $20 million a season for 5 years. And you're probably going to have to guarantee it all. So that is a $100 million commitment. If the numbers are true, and the Titans are paying Brian Callahan $3 million a year on a 5-year deal, that's $15 million. If you're going to pay John Harbaugh $20 million a year, you would pay Harbaugh more in one season than you would pay Brian Callahan throughout his entire contract. Now, Brian Callahan's contract and Brian Callahan's leverage is not the same as John Harbaugh's. But you'd have to pay him. You'd have to make it worth his while to come here. And if you're going to pay a guy $20 million a season to be your head coach, he's in charge of the organization. Let's use the fourth pick. John Harbaugh wants Jeremiah Love and just is obsessed with Jeremiah Love out of Notre Dame. But Mike Borgonzi thinks this team needs Ruben Bain out of Miami. Who's going to win? The 3-14 general manager or the $20 million coach who's signed for the next 5 years? The answer is the $100 million coach. So then you have to ask, does Mike Borgonzi, who just received a total contract that gives him total control on Friday, does he strike you as someone who's just willing to give up that control? Like on Friday, Amy Adams-Strunk finally came out and said, Mike Borgonzi runs the Titans, which she had not said up until that point. Is Mike Borgonzi just going to give that up? Here's a news flash for everybody. Because yesterday I said on Twitter when Harbaugh came free, and I actually talked about this on Monday when we were discussing, if Harbaugh were to come free. I said, if you're going to hire John Harbaugh, he has to get total control of the organization, period. And people on social media are like, how do you even know Harbaugh wants total control of the organization? Newsflash, it's the NFL. Everybody in the NFL wants control because everybody in the NFL has an ego. They're not all Mike Vrabel, but everybody has an ego. Everybody thinks they can do it. If the Tennessee Titans were to come to you and they were to say, hey, we think you can run our football organization, you would say, I can do it. And then you would try your damnedest to do it. I have no experience in the NFL outside of having worked with Floyd, which is not in the NFL. That's outside of the NFL. And if the Titans offered me the general manager position, I'd take it. And I think I could do it. I'd have Sam Darnold as my quarterback. So nobody in the NFL wants to give up power. The only way that you give up power in the NFL is if it is taken from you because you don't have the leverage to hold somebody to your power. John Harbaugh is not taking orders from Mike Borgonzi. And the truth is, in the NFL, when a coach has leverage, the coach ends up getting the power. Look at the coaches around the league who have the final say or total control or whatever you want to call it. These are coaches that, whether it's Kyle Shanahan's contract, which states he picks the players, or whether it's just the reality that Andy Reid's in charge of the Chiefs, these are the coaches that have the ultimate leverage. Mike Vrabel has control. Kyle Shanahan has control. Jim Harbaugh has control. Sean Payton has control. And you can't tell me that John Harbaugh is not in that class of coaches. Pete Carroll in Seattle had control. So if you want John Harbaugh, you have to give John Harbaugh complete and total control. And you have to give John Harbaugh $100 million to coach the team. And that's where I sit when it comes to the Titans. And you people saying, hey, do you think the Titans should go get John Harbaugh? Do you think the Titans should go? And every time I'm like, well, are you willing to give him total control of your team? And are you willing to give him $100 million? If you're willing to give him $100 million and you're willing to give him total control of the team, then maybe you have a shot. Now, it's easy for people that are not the owner, and it's easy for people that are not Mike Borgonzi, the general manager, just to say, yes. But the truth is, Mike Borgonzi doesn't want that. He wants to be the general manager. And I don't know if Amy could pay $100 million for a coach. And that's what it would take. And again, I just love the people that are like, I don't think full control really matters that much. You know who full control doesn't matter to? Full control doesn't matter to a coach who doesn't have options. That's why the coaches that have control have options. Mike Vrabel could have gone to the Jets. That's who they wanted. He went to the Patriots. He's in control of the organization. Again, they don't give this out to Zach Taylor. They give this out to Andy Reid and Sean Payton. Sean Payton, because Russell Wilson was such a disaster, Sean Payton so desperately did not want to coach the Broncos. Sean Payton went in to the 2022 season. That was the year he sat out. He went into that season hoping to land the Dallas job, the Miami job, or the Charger job. Or maybe it was 23. I can't exactly remember the year. Regardless, none of those jobs came open. I think all three of those teams made the playoffs. He wanted to go to a team that had a quarterback, like a Herbert, like a Dak. He wanted warm weather. That's what he wanted. So then, when he decided to get back into it, he wanted the Houston Texans job. The Houston Texans had the number 2 pick in the draft, Texas' state-free income tax, and warm weather. He wanted the Texan job. The Broncos didn't want Sean Payton. They wanted Jim Harbaugh. He stayed in college. Then they wanted DeMeco Ryans. He went to Houston. So it was kind of like nobody wanted the Denver job. And nobody really wanted Payton, which is kind of shocking. Well, Denver needed a coach, and they needed stability. And they have the richest owners in the league. So what did they do? They gave him a boatload of money. I think it's like $18 million a year. They gave him a boatload of money, and they gave him control of the organization. And now, John Harbaugh is in a similar spot. And Harbaugh is getting paid for 3 years. So when it comes to Harbaugh, he calls the shots. Are you willing to do that? And don't give me this bullshit like he didn't have final say in Baltimore, so why would he want final say here? Because it is a badge of honor for a coach to say not only are you the coach, but you're the coach who has control. You're a coach plus. You're in the Belichick class where you run the organization. And John Harbaugh's resume says he deserves that. Just like Jim Harbaugh, just like Sean Payton, just like Andy Reid, just like Mike Vrabel, just like Kyle Shanahan. It's the coaches who don't have options that are willing to say, I'll do whatever the general manager says. That's Matt Nagy. That's not John Harbaugh. And then when you give him that kind of contract that you're going to have to give him, because if you won't give him that contract, somebody else will give him that contract. Well, with that contract comes that kind of authority. And the idea that John Harbaugh is going to look at Mike Borgonzi the same way he looked at Ozzie Newsome is just absurd. And it should be noted, apparently, I think it maybe had been Schrager that tweeted this out, or Fowler, or somebody yesterday said, Harbaugh didn't report to Eric DeCosta in Baltimore. Now, Eric DeCosta ran the roster, but Harbaugh reported to Steve Bisciotti, the owner. That's what's going to happen here. So if you want Harbaugh, that's what it's going to take. And then I decided, okay, so where does the Titans' job rank? And I put an asterisk by this when it comes to Harbaugh, only because we've had the reports that there are teams with head coaches that would consider John Harbaugh if they could get John Harbaugh. So if you can get John Harbaugh, we've got Mike McDaniel. See you, Mike McDaniel. John Harbaugh, you're in. So I tried to be objective with this and say, okay, how would I rank the open jobs? And I'm factoring everything in here. Like I'm factoring who's on the roster. I'm factoring who the owner is and how much, if you're a coach, you can trust the owner. I'm factoring in who the general manager is and what the situation is there. And so here's the list I came up with. Number one, I think the Falcons, it's probably the best job on the market. But I hate this Matt Ryan thing. Matt Ryan is going to come in and be the part-time president, and you're going to answer to Matt Ryan. I got a hard time with that. But at the same time, they got Bijan Robinson at running back, Drake London at wide receiver, Kyle Pitts, who's a free agent, but you can tag him at tight end. And if you're the coach, there is a young quarterback there in Michael Penix. But if you don't like Michael Penix, you can move off of Michael Penix because you didn't draft Michael Penix. And I'm sure there's somebody out there who does like Michael Penix. They've got 2 rookie pass rushers, and so you can build a defense. And I know that Matt Ryan is there and is going to be in charge, and they're going to hire a general manager, and most people think that general manager is going to be Ian Cunningham, who's the Bears' assistant general manager, Harbaugh ain't answering to them. So you can have Matt Ryan there, and you can have Ian Cunningham there, and Ian Cunningham can do all the work. Hey, we got to work out a kicker. Let's bring in 5 guys. Ian Cunningham, you're in charge of that. But the money that it would take to get John Harbaugh is reporting directly to Arthur Blank. And he can have all his intermediaries in there, whether it's Rich McKay and Greg Beatles and Matt Ryan and Johnny Joe and whoever. But if you're going to pay a coach $100 million, the coach is running the show. But, God, I hate that Matt Ryan. Like, if I was a coach, I'm like, I'm not answering to Matt Ryan. No disrespect to Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan has never, ever done anything in the NFL outside of play quarterback. And I'm not answering to Matt Ryan. But they're the top job. Because, again, I look at that roster, 2 rookie pass rushers, Jesse Bates at safety, Bijan Robinson at running back, Kyle Pitts is finally broken out of his shell a little bit at tight end, and they've got the receiver Drake London, and you can build around that. Now, they don't have a first-round pick this year, which sucks, but you can overcome that. Number 2, the Giants. It's New York City. They have a franchise left tackle. They have a bunch of pass rushers. And they've got a young quarterback. But the thing about the young quarterback is the Giants' job isn't definitely attractive because of Jackson Dart. When it comes to Dart, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This is not Justin Herbert, where everybody sees him and says, oh, my God, I love him. I said after they beat the Eagles and Jackson Dart played his balls off, I said, Jackson Dart, watching him play, I feel like I'm watching a combination of Will Levis and Joe Namath. And I don't know which one Jackson Dart is going to be more like. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that think Jackson Dart is going to be more like Will Levis than be like Joe Namath. And if John Harbaugh feels that way, well, John Harbaugh can get out of that. Maybe not right away, but just like Sean Payton in Denver, his long-term plan was never Russell Wilson. So you've got a young quarterback in New York, but you don't have a young quarterback that you use the number 1 pick on. You don't have a young quarterback that you traded multiple number 1s in order to move up and get. If you like Dart, roll with him. If not, you can replace him pretty quickly. And then Joe Schoen, who I think is incompetent, has been retained as the general manager in New York. And I think a lot of that may have to do with John Mara's health. They showed John Mara getting a game ball on Sunday, and John Mara does not look good. And I hope for John Mara's sake that he ends up beating this cancer and everything else, but he did not look good. And I can see when you have to have a coaching search, I can see an owner who's dealing with cancer saying, you know what, Joe Schoen, you run it because I'm worried about my cancer fight. But Joe Schoen will not get in John Harbaugh's way. Shane knows if we hire Harbaugh, I'm working for Harbaugh. Shane knows he's on thin ice. He's known he's on thin ice for 3 years. So similar to George Payton, who is technically the general manager in Denver, George Payton had power. Then Nathaniel Hackett happened. Then Russell Wilson happened. Then the Walton family bought the team. Now George Payton works for Sean Payton. That would be what Joe Schoen would do for John Harbaugh. And the one thing I'll say about that Hard Knock series the Giants did that nobody else will ever do, I felt as if when I watched that, Brian Daboll came off to me as lazy. John Harbaugh is not lazy. John Harbaugh is definitely much more of a CEO coach than Daboll, who was more of an offensive coordinator as a coach. So the Falcons, I think, are the best job. The Giants are the second best job. But again, we're excluding Baltimore because Harbaugh's not going back to Baltimore. Number 3, the Titans. Ownership is a mess, but they do have a young quarterback. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder with Cam Ward. I would not want the Titans job. But I do wonder if John Harbaugh says, hey, I can hire Greg Roman to be the offensive coordinator, or I can bring Todd Monken with me, and Todd Monken can work with Cam Ward, or whatever. I think it speaks more to the jobs beneath the Titans than it does anything good about the Titans. And there's one thing I heard Mike Borgonzi say yesterday, and I've heard fans say, and I just want to nip this right in the tush. What's great about this job? Well, this job, Nashville's a great city, and that is true, and coaches do care about that. And there's no state income tax. And again, if you're going to pay the coach $20 million a year, state income tax does matter. But then I hear people say, there's a new stadium. John Harbaugh doesn't give a fuck about the stadium. Number one, why should John Harbaugh give a fuck about the stadium? On one hand, all these guys have been fired. I mean, Rand Carthon, Chad Brinker, and Brian Callahan were at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new stadium, and they're all pretty much dead and gone. So what does John Harbaugh care about a new stadium? This is not college football, and he's not recruiting to this. He doesn't care about a new stadium. No coach cares about the stadium. Well, it's a nice stadium that I work at 8 times a year. Stupid. Number 4, Arizona. Ownership is a mess in Arizona. But unlike the Titans, Arizona doesn't have a young quarterback. They have an expensive, short quarterback who's not that good. And I don't think Arizona will be able to get a quarterback to come in here. They're going to get rid of Kyler, but I don't see a path for them getting a better quarterback. I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback because I don't think they're going to be in position to draft a quarterback. And not only do I think they're not going to draft a quarterback, I also like Kirk Cousins, Mac Jones. And if you get Mac Jones, you have to trade with the 49ers in order to acquire Mac Jones. And so now you have to trade assets to a division rival to get an average quarterback. No, thank you. So I cannot imagine going to Arizona, bad ownership, Monty Ossenfort, the GM there, feels like he kind of stinks. And I got to go with Snoop Huntley as my quarterback? Pass. 5 is Cleveland. Ownership is a mess, just like the Titans, just like Arizona. Well, and Atlanta, ownership's a mess too. Ownership's a mess, but the owner does spend money, and that's important to the coach, especially the coach who has final say. When the owner says, I'll spend whatever it takes, that tells the coach, I can go get all these extra players that are going to be good right now. They got a great defense. They got a good amount of picks after their trade with Jacksonville last year. But you got to deal with the owner. And if Harbaugh takes the job, I think they can find a quarterback, whether that's Cousins or, again, Mac Jones. It'll be a lot easier to get Mac Jones to Cleveland than it would be to get him to a division rival in Arizona. I mean, maybe I could convince myself Cleveland ahead of Arizona, but Jimmy Haslam just... And 6, Vegas. Vegas is a fucked up spot. And we'll get into Vegas more in a second because ESPN had this big piece on why Vegas is so screwed up. The owner is a total dope who is incredibly indecisive and impulsive. And I just can't imagine that an 18-year veteran in John Harbaugh is going to answer to Tom Brady. And Tom Brady runs the organization there. I can't see Harbaugh wanting to do that. They're going to draft a rookie quarterback this year. They'll probably spend money on the roster. Max Crosby's there. But it's just such a train wreck of an organization. I mean, Pete Carroll, say what you want. Pete Carroll's not a 2-win coach. But because the Raiders are so fucked up, Pete Carroll couldn't do anything this year. So Vegas to me is the worst job. And think about this too when it comes to Vegas. All these guys the last 3 years that have been the Vegas coach, Mike Vrabel was the Titan coach, and it's a dysfunctional mess here, but it didn't ruin his reputation by being the Titans coach. It has ruined Josh McDaniels' reputation. It has ruined Pete Carroll's reputation. Pete Carroll's not getting another job. It has ruined Antonio Pierce. Like, it's ruined these guys' reputations. And I think Harbaugh knows I have a sterling reputation. I don't want to go to a disastrous organization and then just ruin all of that. So the way I rank it right now, Falcons, Giants, Titans, Arizona, Cleveland, Vegas. Third's not bad. So once again, if you want to have the discussion about John Harbaugh, should the Titans hire John Harbaugh? Here is your answer. Number 1, in order to get John Harbaugh, you must give him complete and total control of the roster. Number 2, if you want John Harbaugh, you must offer him $20 million a year for 5 years with no offsets, by the way. That's how you really tell somebody you mean business. You say, I will give you $100 million no matter what. Number 3, they need to promise to keep everybody in that organization except for Amy and Borgonzi out of his way. You're never going to be more powerful than the owner, so let's not pretend like you ever would be, no matter how much money they give you. And Mike Borgonzi's the general manager. Everybody else, stay out of the way. If Harbaugh doesn't want to deal with Brinker, stay out of the way. If Harbaugh doesn't want to deal with Dave Ziegler, stay out of the way. Just stay out of the way. Burke Nihill, Adolfo Birch, Bryce Wasserman, stay out of the way. You can get in Matt Nagy's way. Matt Nagy doesn't have the leverage to tell those guys, hey, get the fuck out of my way. You want John Harbaugh, you got to get them out of his way. Then I think you have to hope Atlanta and the Giants don't do the same thing. Because if the Giants or Atlanta go to John Harbaugh and they say, here's $100 million and we want you to be in charge of our operation, he's going to take those jobs before he takes your jobs. And then finally, the 5th thing. Hope that Green Bay doesn't fire Matt LaFleur. And that is something that yesterday, as this all came up about where Harbaugh's going to go and what's going to happen, kind of popped into my head. Now, I'm not reporting this is going to happen. I have no insight into this. And I don't know what's going to happen on Saturday night against the Chicago Bears. Because if the Green Bay Packers, without Micah Parsons, go into Soldier Field and win 41-7, I'm going to have a hard time believing they're going to fire Matt LaFleur. But it does seem odd that Ed Policy takes the job over, and with 2 years left on the contract of Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur, Ed Policy, the team president, which is essentially the owner in Green Bay, says, I'm not going to extend them, and I don't believe in lame duck coaches. Translation, I'm either extending them at the end of the year or I'm firing them. And there has been a lot of talk about whether it's Jay Glazer or Adam Schefter about whether or not Matt LaFleur's safe. And I look at LaFleur. He's a good coach. He's got a good reputation. I look at Harbaugh. He's a good coach. He's got a good reputation. If you're the Green Bay Packers and you're going to fire Matt LaFleur, you better know who you're going to hire. And it better be somebody good. And if you're the Baltimore Ravens and you fire John Harbaugh, and you've got Lamar Jackson in his prime, and you may have to give Lamar Jackson a new contract, and you got Derrick Henry, you're going to need to hire a coach who is worthy of coaching that team. I saw yesterday somebody on Twitter said, what about Cliff Kingsbury for Lamar Jackson? I'm like, Cliff Kingsbury? The guy that lost at Texas Tech, lost in Arizona, just got fired in Washington? You're going to make him the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. You're going to fire John Harbaugh for Cliff Kingsbury? No. So Baltimore has to get a good coach. Now, Baltimore's the kind of place that can hire a coordinator and say, trust us, we know this guy's going to be a good coach. Like they could hire Jesse Mentor and say, trust us, we know he's going to be a good coach. And that might work out. And they would get the benefit of the doubt. But I say this. If Green Bay loses on Saturday night, and Matt LaFleur does get fired because Ed Policy says he's a good coach, but I think I can do better. Green Bay and Baltimore are the two best jobs. If Green Bay fires LaFleur, don't you think Harbaugh wants to go to Green Bay? And he can probably, because Gutekunst is tied to LaFleur, and they can probably tell Ed Policy, like, hey, we're coming, but you got to bring my guy, whoever that may be. Whether it's somebody in the Ravens personnel department, I think there's somebody Daniel Jeremiah was talking about in the Chargers personnel department. I'm bringing my guy with me. The same way his brother brought Joe Ortiz with him to the Chargers. And that's your GM and coach. And how do you turn that down if you're Green Bay? You've got Jordan Love in his prime. If you're going to fire Matt LaFleur, you got to have a good coach to replace him with. And if you're the Ravens, you're the top job that's open. You're Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. Would you not just hire Matt LaFleur? Like you're really going to hire Anthony Weaver over Matt LaFleur? I don't think so. So if Green Bay loses on Saturday night, I do wonder if there could essentially be a trade of coaches where Harbaugh goes to Green Bay, LaFleur goes to Baltimore. Because those are by far the two best jobs. Again, the Falcons, you have to work for Matt Ryan. Now, LaFleur would be interesting with the Falcons, and I think the Falcons would make the full court push, the full court press for LaFleur. Because if you remember, LaFleur was, I want to say, the quarterback's coach in Atlanta when Matt Ryan was league MVP. So if Matt Ryan is running the operation and Matt LaFleur becomes available, now instead of these coaching candidates trying to impress Matt Ryan, this now becomes Matt Ryan's recruiting Matt LaFleur, and Matt Ryan's not going to get in the way of Matt LaFleur. But I just think, what about a trade? Harbaugh to Green Bay, LaFleur to Baltimore. Kind of feels like everybody wins. So you better hope, if you're the Titans and you really want John Harbaugh, you better hope that Green Bay doesn't fire LaFleur. That said, I find it really hard to believe that Amy Adams-Strunk is going to give $100 million to John Harbaugh. I find it really hard to believe that Mike Borgonzi is going to just give John Harbaugh all the power that he received on Friday. So when you say, Jared, we need to hire John Harbaugh, those are the conditions. And even then, he may not want to come. But that's what it would take in order to get him. The idea that John Harbaugh, who is going to make at least $16 million next year, even if he sits on his couch with his finger up his ass, is going to take your terrible job and answer to a 3-14 general manager is absurd. John Harbaugh is going to run the show. Just like Sean Payton, just like Andy Reid, just like Mike Vrabel, just like his brother, just like Kyle Shanahan. Because he is in that class of coaches. So you better be willing to do that. And I don't think the Titans are willing to do that. Again, as somebody who once worked somewhere where we sat around and talked about, oh my God, could you imagine if we were ever number one? And could you imagine if we ever got real ratings and success on the radio? And then it happens. And then it comes time for a contract. And they just don't have it in them to do that. They're not going to change. And that's going to be the same way with the Titans. They're not going to pay a coach $100 million. It's just not going to happen. So for everybody out there that wants Harbaugh, that's what it's going to take. And even then, you might not get him. Now, how about this nugget that came out of left field yesterday? Talk about shocked. I wasn't shocked when I saw that Harbaugh was getting fired in Baltimore because there was a lot of talk about Harbaugh getting canned in Baltimore. I was pretty surprised yesterday when I saw the Adam Schefter report that the Tennessee Titans are going to interview Jason Garrett to be the next head coach of the Titans. Yes, Jason Garrett, Coach Clap. I couldn't believe it. Twitter yesterday, when that came out, lost their ever-loving minds over the idea of Jason Garrett being the next coach of the Titans. But let me just say this when it comes to the Titans and Jason Garrett. What did I tell you on Monday when it came to all the job interviews the Titans were going to do? I said they already know who they're going to hire, but they are going to interview everybody and their grandma so they can say they interviewed everybody and their grandma. And some of their interviews will be favors. For instance, Steve Spagnuolo is not going to be the next head coach of the Titans, but Steve Spagnuolo is getting a head coaching interview. Why? It's a favor that tells the league, hey, don't forget about Spags. We're interviewing him to be our head coach. He must be worth something. Mike McCoy is a favor interview. They don't need to interview Mike McCoy to be the coach. They already know what he would be. They're not going to hire him. But they're interviewing him as a favor, as a thank you for the good job that Mike McCoy did holding things together as an interim head coach. And this, I believe, is the third favor interview the Titans are doing. I think Jason Garrett is getting an interview because Jason Garrett's first staff in Dallas had a defensive assistant on it. That is the lowest level position there is in the NFL. Defensive assistant, quality control coach, an offensive assistant, defensive assistant. It's one of the guys that's technically a coach, but they're not making real money. They don't have their own office. They're a low-level coach. The first year that Jason Garrett was the full-time head coach in Dallas, 2011. He took over for Wade Phillips in 2010. In 2011, Jason Garrett put together his first staff. And he had a defensive assistant, a low-level coaching position on his staff with a coach by the name of Dave Borgonzi. That is Mike Borgonzi's brother. Now, Mike Borgonzi's brother, Dave, is the linebackers coach now for the Dallas Cowboys. Dave Borgonzi got his start in the NFL by coaching for Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett, if you will remember, was a Princeton guy, Ivy League guy. He hired Dave Borgonzi from Harvard, where he was coaching DBs. Now, Jason Garrett has been out of the game since 2021 when he was fired by Joe Judge as the offensive coordinator of the New York Giants. Like all these football people, they all want back in. Sometimes that's why they do television. It's not because they want the paycheck or not because they want the notoriety, but they do television because they want back in. They want people to remember them. And I don't know if that's the case with Jason Garrett or not. But Jason Garrett wants people to remember his name. Give me a job interview. I'm only 59 years old. It's not like I'm 78. But as far as the Titans actually hiring Jason Garrett, this is not a serious interview. But I will say this about Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett was not that bad as a head coach in Dallas. He was 85-67 in Dallas. He won Coach of the Year in 2016 in Dallas. His resume is a lot like Matt Nagy's. Made the playoffs a couple of times, Coach of the Year. But he also has this that Matt Nagy doesn't have, that Cliff Kingsbury doesn't have, that a lot of these prospective coaches do not have. They took a quarterback in the 4th round by the name of Dak Prescott, and they have developed him into a top 10 quarterback. Not saying I'd hire Jason Garrett, but let's not act like Jason Garrett was an unmitigated disaster in Dallas. He wasn't. They made the playoffs. They won a playoff game under Jason Garrett, got screwed out of another playoff game under Jason Garrett. And Dallas is a very unique situation in the NFL. Jerry doesn't like to spend, and Jerry likes all the attention. And the head coach works for Jerry, which is why Bill Parcells didn't last very long in Dallas, because Bill Parcells and Jerry just couldn't be together forever. So Jason Garrett was great at playing the game with Jerry Jones. Well, that's a very unique situation here. But let's not act like Jason Garrett was just all bad in Dallas, because he wasn't. Again, he was 85-67. Dave Campo, talk about a slap dick coach. Dave Campo was disastrous in Dallas. He was 15-33 in 3 years. That's disastrous. Brian Callahan, 4 wins in a season and a half. That's disastrous. Jason Garrett was not a disaster in Dallas. And I'm surprised Jason Garrett didn't get a second chance. Now, again, if I was Jason Garrett, I would not have gone to the Joe Judge New York Giants to be offensive coordinator to rehabilitate my image. But, hey, it happens. But I think Jason Garrett is a favor interview. Jason Garrett gave Mike Borgonzi's brother his shot in the NFL. And because of that, Mike Borgonzi probably feels somebody probably reached out and said, will you just give Jason Garrett an interview? And Mike Borgonzi already knows who he's going to hire, I believe. And so he's probably just going to sit back there and just say, okay, yeah, fine, I'll give him an interview. It's fine. I mean, look at the Titans general manager search. They interviewed a bunch of guys they knew they weren't going to hire. Those are courtesy interviews. They knew they weren't going to hire Thomas Dimitroff. That was a courtesy interview. They knew when they hired Rand Carthon and they interviewed Ryan Cowden and Monty Ossenfort, they knew they weren't going to hire them. Courtesy interviews happen all the time. Jason Garrett is a courtesy interview. Don't read too much into it. And finally, I want to get to this, that just, I was laughing my ass off. So yesterday I talked about how just embarrassing I think this new trend in the NFL is. These kooky owners who have owned teams for a while apparently have no idea what a general manager does or what a team president is supposed to do. And so they hire these ex-quarterbacks who have no experience to come in and run the organization. Matt Ryan is going to run the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan has no experience outside of playing quarterback in the NFL. I mean, it's amazing to me. That's like taking the top combat veteran and saying, okay, you led the raid on bin Laden. Let's make you president. That guy what does he know about foreign policy? Nothing. What does he know about the economy? Nothing. He's a combat veteran. Very good at it, but what do they know about? Nothing. It's the same as Tom Brady and Matt Ryan and Troy Aikman trying to help run these organizations. ESPN dropped a huge piece on the Raiders and why they suck so bad. And I read it. And it basically can be boiled down to Mark Davis being crazy and impulsive, and then people around the league, whether it's agents or other general managers, or looking at Tom Brady saying, what is he doing? Apparently, Tom Brady's first choice was Ben Johnson, and he was desperate to get Ben Johnson. And he tried to get Ben Johnson. Apparently, Ben Johnson had no interest in the Raiders until Brady got involved, and then he took an interview. But the Raiders are so dysfunctional, they couldn't even offer Ben Johnson a contract by the time he had already been hired by the Chicago Bears. Which is also crazy because Brady called the game that night when they lost in Detroit. And then the next day he got hired by Chicago. Brady was calling the game. Brady can't go down to the field and say, hey, $20 million. I guess not. But there was a section in this article that I want to point out, because this told me all I need to know about this Raiders approach. And again, the idea that star power actually matters in terms of building a team. Quote, in February, Tom Brady tried to recruit Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford when LA gave Stafford's agent permission to seek a trade. There was the infamous report of a planned recruiting visit in which Brady hosted Stafford at his home in Montana, and subsequent counter report that there was an unplanned Montana ski resort run-in between Brady and Stafford. Per multiple reports, the Raiders were willing to offer Stafford a 2-year deal worth $90 to $100 million, but Stafford ultimately chose to sign an extension in LA. So Brady met with Stafford, Brady recruited Stafford, Brady offered Stafford a 2-year deal worth between $90 to $100 million, but ultimately Stafford said, no, I'm going to stay in LA. Keep that in mind. We'll circle back to that in a second. The next paragraph, The Athletic reported that Brady was not in favor of signing free agent quarterback Sam Darnold, so the team traded with Seattle for quarterback Geno Smith, while Seattle signed Darnold, who has put together back-to-back 14-win seasons for two different teams. Let's stop there. So again, Brady wanted Stafford, offered him $90 to $100 million, which probably means they offered him $90 million, or they offered him $95 million. At most, they offered him $50 million a season. That was the most they offered Matthew Stafford for 2 years. And then Tom Brady said no on Sam Darnold, so they went with Geno Smith. So Tom Brady wanted Matthew Stafford with a 74-year-old coach. That makes sense to me. You're basically telling Matthew Stafford, hey, man, we're desperate for you. Pete Carroll's a good coach, and we want you to come in and we want you to lead this team. This is a lot like hiring a coach. When you sit down with Matthew Stafford and you have that conversation, Matthew Stafford has all the leverage, not you. If you're recruiting Matthew Stafford, you have to make the deal so good for Matthew Stafford that he's willing to say no. At that point in time, Kelly Stafford had done her podcast, and she basically said, And I'm paraphrasing what she said, but we're okay with leaving the Rams now. Last year when we thought about leaving the Rams, it hurt. This year, we're cool with it. And we're cool with it because they're not respecting us. Again, these quarterbacks are making $50+ million a year. Tua's making 53. Jordan Love's making 55. Matthew Stafford's making 46. That's not right. And there's a certain level of resentment that comes with, you're not going to pay me what I'm worth? Fine. I'll have somebody else show me that they love me. But if you're going to go after Matthew Stafford with a 2-year deal, $100 million ain't going to cut it. Because Matthew Stafford has made $400 million in his career. And the Rams ended up paying him a 2-year deal worth $84 million. So when it comes to $90 million, which again, the report was between 90 and 100 for Stafford, you're offering Stafford $6 million extra dollars, at most $16 million extra dollars to go to the shit Raiders? I don't think so. If Brady was serious about Stafford, if Mark Davis was serious about doing whatever it took, then they should have offered Matthew Stafford $60 million a year. Because Dak Prescott makes $60 million a year. And Dak Prescott makes $60 million because Dak Prescott has the leverage to make $60 million. Dak could not be tagged. And if he had gone into free agency, it would have been a massive bidding war, and Jerry knew it. So the price was $60 million, and they paid it. That's the quarterback who has leverage. If you're going to sit down with Matthew Stafford and you're going to say, we want you to leave the comfort of Sean McVay, the Rams, where you've been home for the last 5 years, you're throwing to Puka Nacua, we want you to come to the Raiders. You have to knock his socks off. How do you do it? We'll make you the highest paid quarterback in the league. But Brady didn't do that. They should have offered Stafford $120 million fully guaranteed over 2 years, or $165 million over 3 years, again, fully guaranteed. Well, we don't want to do that. Okay, well, you don't want to do that. You're not going to get Matthew Stafford, and you're going to win 2 games. Then there's the Darnold thing. Tom Brady didn't like Sam Darnold. He was too good for Sam Darnold. That's fine. A lot of people didn't like Sam Darnold. The Titans didn't like Sam Darnold. But the Titans at least could say, hey, we're going to go draft Cam Ward, and we believe that Cam Ward has the potential to be a superstar franchise quarterback, and so we're going to develop Cam Ward, and we're going to do that instead of sign Sam Darnold. That's fine. Again, I don't agree with it, but that is at least a path. Brady's path was Geno Smith. Well, we're too good for Sam Darnold, so we're going to go get Geno Smith. And not only are we going to go get Geno Smith, but we're going to go get Geno Smith, and we're going to pay Geno Smith more than Sam Darnold's getting paid in Seattle. Sam makes $33.5 million a year, which, by the way, after this year, I bet that's getting changed and will be more in the $45-50 million range. But Sam's getting 35.5 in Seattle. Geno's getting 37.5 with the Raiders. So you didn't like Sam Darnold so much that you'd rather take Geno Smith, the definition of a mediocre quarterback, pay him more money than Sam Darnold. He's 7 years older than Sam Darnold, and deal a 3rd-round pick, the 92nd pick in the draft, in order to get him. Do you see the difference between the stupid organizations like the Raiders and the smart organizations like the Seahawks? The Seahawks signed, without giving anything up, a 28-year-old quarterback coming off of a 14-win season to a $33.5 million a year contract. In a league in which the going rate for Tua is $53 million. And they got a 3rd-round pick. John Schneider hasn't won 7 Super Bowls as a player. But John Schneider knows how the NFL works. Tom Brady doesn't. And this is a classic example of somebody not knowing what they're doing. This is a lot like when Derek Jeter was a partner with the Marlins and ran their operation. and traded Christian Yelich for Lewis Brinson. Because even though Lewis Brinson wasn't good, he was the Brewers' top prospect, and that's what mattered to Jeter was you got to trade me your top prospect. The Braves called on Christian Yelich. Their top prospect was Ronald Acuna. And Jeter said, if you want Christian Yelich, you got to give me Ronald Acuna. You have to give me your top prospect. Now, the Braves' seventh prospect was better than Lewis Brinson, the Brewers' top prospect, but that didn't matter to Jeter because Jeter didn't know what the fuck he was doing. Just like Michael Jordan didn't know what the fuck he was doing running the Charlotte Bobcats, Tom Brady doesn't know what the fuck he's doing running the Raiders. I love Tom Brady. He's my favorite football player of all time. I've watched his documentary. I've read his book. You know me. I love Brady. But he has no idea what he's doing. Why? Because he's never done anything like this, remotely like this, in his life. And I just feel like some of these owners, Mark Davis and Arthur Blank, and they don't get it. Just because you could play quarterback well doesn't mean you can run a team. You've never done anything like that in your life. Just because you're really good at something doesn't mean you're really good at everything. I love how in that ESPN story, another personnel executive for another NFL team said, why couldn't they get the coach and QB they wanted? Because people view that place as a place of constant dysfunction. And now Tom is involved. And what he did this year looks like what? More dysfunction. Why would people that have options and choices be interested? And the answer is they're not. So when you have a dysfunctional organization and you want John Harbaugh to be your coach, you better give him something somebody else can't because he has choices. When you're a dysfunctional organization and you want to recruit Matthew Stafford to be your quarterback or you want to recruit Peyton Manning to be your quarterback, you better give him something somebody else can't because he's got options. And for some reason, I just think people in the NFL, sometimes they don't think, they're like, this is the NFL. You should work for us. Doesn't work like that. Try to give Stafford a $6 million raise over 2 years. You got to get him to go to the Raiders. Maybe they try to sell the new stadium as a pitching point too. We got a new stadium. Don't care about that. Give me the money. That's it for us. Great show today. I am headed on a plane to sunny Florida. I will see you from the beach tomorrow. I'll be doing the show tomorrow, probably doing the show on Friday as well. And whenever some big news breaks, if news breaks, we will go live. I've promised that here on the program. Everybody have a great day. Like and subscribe. Stillman & Company. We'll see you all tomorrow, 2 o'clock.